You don't want to waste that like 45 minutes of the memory card and then you're just too lazy to.
Yeah. Or you're pissed because you're like, yeah. I voted negative. You're like,
I'm not even listening. Just kidding.
Peace out 30 seconds.
Good to go? Anyone not ready? Who will ever relate the whole history of narcotica? It is almost the history of culture, our so-called higher culture. As early as the year 2737 BC, Chinese Emperor Xin Ning mentioned the use of marijuana in his pharmacopoeia. The history of drug use is as long as the history of culture, mysticism, and ritual. The word drug itself is bound up in this history. Montero writes, drugs is both a word and a concept, a plant, root, or substance is for us a thing, apprehended through the name of a concept and the device of an interpretation. No, in the case of drugs, the regime of the concept is different. There are no drugs in nature. There may be natural poisons, but they are not as such drugs. As with addiction, the concept of drugs supposes an instituted and an institutional definition. A history is required, and a culture, conventions, evaluations, norms, and an entire network of intertwined discourses, a rhetoric. The drug can be poison or remedy. The power of sorcery that lies in fascination itself can make any remedy into poison. Derrida writes in Plato's Pharmacy. A fountain with curative powers was dedicated to pharmacia near the Ilyssus. Pharmakia is a common noun signifying the administration of the pharmacon, the drug, the medicine, and or poison. Poisoning was not the least usual meaning of pharmacia. Socrates compares the written text Phaedrus was brought along to a drug. The pharmacon, both remedy and poison, already introduces itself into the body of the discourse. Through this power of fascination can be simultaneously beneficent or maleficent. The pharmacon will be a substance with occult virtues, cryptic depths, refusing to submit to analysis. Anti-substance itself, that which resists any philosophy, exceeding its bounds is non-essence, granting philosophy by the very fact of the inexhaustible adversity of what funds it and the infinite abyss of what founds it. And the spellbinding fascination that accompanies the simultaneous presence and absence haunts the rhetoric of pharmacon and the pharmacon of rhetoric. David Applebaum writes, there is the moment in Shakespeare when Horatio addresses the ghost of Hamlet's father, the dead king. It is quite possible that Marcellus has anticipated the coming of the scholar of the future, a scholar who would dare to speak of the phantom, eliminating or claiming that this not only neither contradicts nor limits scholarship, but will in truth have conditioned it. And this phantom comes to us through writing and rhetoric, as Attias reminds us. It is this life of the memory of the pharmacon of writing would come to hypnotize, fascinating it, taking itself out of itself by putting itself to sleep in a monument, letting itself get stoned by its own signs. It will sink down into the lake, overcome by non-knowledge and forgetfulness. For writing has no essence or value of its own. It plays within the simulacrum. It is the mime of memory, of knowledge, of truth. The alteration of mood and mental state through the ingestion of chemicals has a history as old as human civilization. The pharmacon is pure simulacrum with no material essence, yet this is the basis of historical memory, of knowledge, of truth, and hence of material power. So we ask, how do we study the history of a memory, the image of an image, the madness of the reefer? Montero writes in 2010, the only way to study the truth is to examine the subjective, the rhetoric augmenting the aggregate of human relations. The rhetoric of those in power eclipses the rhetoric of the less powerful. It is appropriate to consider truth not solely as the sum of human power relations, but the sum of human relations subjugated by systems of power. Those in control of media can be referred to as the dominant group holding the power to impart knowledge to the masses. The Federal Bureau of Narcotics had the means to reach large audiences with their drug rhetoric, shaping the foundation of American ideology regarding marijuana. Anslinger, pictured here, became the first commissioner of the FBN. Anslinger masterminded a very efficient national campaign to determine public attitudes towards marijuana. He's probably the most important player in the history of both American and international anti-narcotics law enforcement and legislation. Anslinger's racial radical assessments went unrestricted. In a 1932 report, the Bureau's emphasis on the marijuana problem is evident. 2 years after the formation of the FBN, the effects of the Great Depression began to place economic pressure on the organization. Anslinger had to find a new target, a new drug menace upon which to peg a budget increase. Anslinger directed his attack on marijuana, spreading grotesque anti-marijuana literature and reports. The FBN employed a rhetoric of power by observing the available means in which to persuade. Anslinger, again pictured, states the insidious and insanity-producing marijuana has become among the worst of all narcotic veins, invading even the schoolhouses of the country, and the Uniform State Narcotic Law is the only legislation yet devised to deal effectively with this horrid menace. Anslinger's goal was to establish a subjective feeling within a legislation attempting to objectively weigh marijuana. The Union Signal, a paper, transcribed Anslinger's approximation that, quote, 50% of the violent crimes committed in districts occupied by Mexicans, Greeks, Turks, Filipinos, Spaniards, Latin Americans, and Negroes may be traced to the use of marijuana. They become bestial demon acts filled with a mad lust to kill. Anslinger's operation generated reefer madness. 2 weeks following the shocking propaganda campaign against the evil drug, Congress met to measure the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937, implementing a punitive tax with controlled social use, making marijuana unattainable by repressive taxation. Plato remained suspicious of all pharmacon in general, even in the case of drugs used exclusively for therapeutic ends, wielded with good intentions, and even when they are effective, the pharmacon can never be simply beneficial. Rather than studying the poison and remedy within each, the public tends to become exceedingly fearful of specific drugs while accommodating others. Specified discrimination is a result of the power of rhetoric. Anslinger's rhetoric facilitated the development of American society's view concerning marijuana. What we refer to as reality has been built up to us through nothing but our symbol system. Rhetoric, part of this symbol system, shapes each individual's reality. It is difficult to measure the extent of truth or fallacy at rhetoric's source. Vulnerable to systems of power, rhetoric is shared social knowledge which can be manipulated in ways to motivate people to behave and act in one way as opposed to others. The FBN manipulated shared social knowledge to induce individuals to fear marijuana and bestialize its owners. Rhetoric is not only persuasion, but identification as a social cohesive force. In the first image, pictured here, a white child sits dressed in fine upper-class garments. Lace, flowers, and a feathered hat designate what wealth and what turn-of-the-century white America considered to be high class. With pinky up, the child sips a glass saucer of coca-addled refreshment next to a vase of flowers and an ornate ad that displays the brand of Coca-Cola. This image evokes both nostalgia for old-world values and appeals to an ideograph of society that implicitly draws moral lines based on ethnicity and class status. In the second image, published by the FBN under Anslinger, a group of black demonic figures supporting horns are seen throwing children and women into a fire below a satanic statue of Moloch. These dope peddlers are cast as a dark menace to society, taking white scholars, women, and police officers away from the seemingly ordered society featured in the foreground. These propaganda images both evoke the ideograph of social order, a symbolic network of interwoven meaning shaped by the assumptions of turn-of-the-century America. While cocaine is advertised as a classy drug safe enough for children, marijuana is an assassin of youth, stealing productive members of society from normalcy and thrusting them into the so-called criminal depravity associated with the devil's drug. Our approach to history is to turn it into a battering ram, to topple the idols of truth and knowledge that weave themselves into the social fabric of rhetoric. Matthias 97. Knowledge is an exercise of power through the codification of power relationships. At one point in time, it was common knowledge that the dark-skinned people were inferior to light-skinned people. This knowledge had material effect in perpetuating power relationships. The kidnapping and enslavement of African blacks and the genocide of American natives were the material results of this knowledge in this country. The one constant in the progress of knowledge throughout history is the exercise of power of domination. Humanity does not gradually progress from combat to combat until it arrives at universal reciprocity where the rule of law finally replaces warfare. Humanity installs each of its violences in a system of rules and thus proceeds from domination to domination. This conception of history leads the genealogist to a practice of historical writing as a discursive intervention. The genealogist approaches historical knowledge as the general approaches warfare. The genealogist made thought into a machine of war, battering ram. Genealogy is not simply a matter of writing new histories to reflect the historian's sake in political struggles. The genealogist works when blood is available and rereads the surface of cultural activity and finds meaning is different from what it seems. Genealogical redistribution of surface fragments not only demystifies the veiling ideology of the system, but produces a new reading, which is more convincing asymptotic approximation of the truth of the matter. The discursive formulation surrounding the concept of drug abuse has been delimited. These assumptions have become invisible assumptions. They have become truths in Nietzsche's sense, of illusions about which that is what one has forgotten that they are. That is what they are. The term drugs has been imbued. When one mentions drug abuse, she is obviously not talking about the forcible injection of mental patients with neuroleptics such as chloroprazamine or haloperidol. These are considered antipsychotic agents. Drug abuse does not refer to a patient's physical addiction to chemicals such as morphine or Valium, if prescribed in a hospital. And while a person addicted to heroin is clearly abusing drugs, a person addicted to methadone is just as clearly seeking treatment to stop abusing drugs. The statement that drugs are dangerous is ridiculous from a purely literal standpoint. A pound of arsenic is no more dangerous than a pound of lettuce. All substances are toxic to the human body at some dose level. One should be leery of any foreign substance introduced into the body rather than developing a morbid fear of substances and a tolerance of others. When drugs become the omnipotent demon with the power to drag the unsuspecting victim into addiction, crime, and death, it becomes rational to wage war on the demon. The metaphor of a war on drugs is itself comes to justify the massive use of actual military force. As in the case of the invasion of Panama or the National Guard deployment to marijuana fields, the metaphor gathers material reality. Drug use is a crime itself. Drug use itself is a crime. Ipso facto, drug users are criminals. By defining drug use as criminal activity, the state ensures the creation of an underground. Until approximately the last quarter of the 19th century, the use of drugs was portrayed in the public discourse as an activity some people engaged in, rather than something that defined the personality of the user. The social definition of the drug user does not come to influence these discourses until the end of the 19th century. The notion of social decay is meaningless. Has anyone ever actually seen society fall apart? Society is not a building with material essence. It is a discursive formation. It has political utility as an ideograph. Society as a sutured space does not exist. Society is an ultimate impossibility, an impossible object. It exists only as the attempt to constitute the impossible object of order. Good to go?
What's going on? Are we in prep?
Is this cross-ex prep speech time? What's up?
Oh, we're getting ready to speak.
Oh, okay.
Norman Pritchard, Guy's Galax. Sound variegated through beneath lit. Sound variegated through beneath lit. Through sound beneath variegated lit. Sound variegated through beneath lit. Variegated sound through beneath lit dark. Variegated sound through beneath lit dark. Sound variegated through beneath lit. Variegated sound through beneath lit dark. Through variegated beneath sound lit. Through variegated beneath sound lit. Through beneath lit. Through beneath lit. Through beneath lit. Through beneath. Through beneath lit. Through beneath. Through beneath lit. Through beneath. Through beneath, 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 through beneath lit. Twainly ample of amongst. Twainly ample of amongst. Twainly ample of amongst. Twainly ample of amongst. In lit black beauty, beauty and beauty, beauty and beauty, beauty and beauty, and lit black beauty, and dark to stark, in dark to stark. In dark to stark, in dark to stark, in dark to stark, in dark to stark lit.
Moment in 7, this instance of black poetry, black hand is a kind of transverse black hand where modern philosophy takes its own rapturing where the poetry breaks down its own instantation, racial underground that is beneath, like beneath the literal underground of their own ground and disestablishment of their ground is unguarded, unregulated moments of field, or a gathering where a possibility and a cosmopolitan lies very ready to erupt the cities, unruly where the micro cities are homeless at home, blackness is a form of garment of continual eruption against the very idea of representing the deathly or even death-driven nakedness. The fatal flaw brings regulation into existence to a history irregularly punctuated by regulation as compensation is surplus as a payment of massive incalculable debt by the ones who not only are promised it, but also the ones who are old, the ones who have bear the trace of their being on considering the following statement. There is nothing wrong with blackness. What if there's a primitive axiom, a new blackness studies underived from the psychopolitical pathology of populations, corollary theorization of the state, and a source or state racism, an axiom derived from the runaways' tones and illegal eloquent vulgarities encrypted in the vernacular works that turns out to be the native one slave only insofar as the fugitive is misrecognized in the bear lies that turns out to be bare only insofar as no attention is paid to their form insofar as lies persist the electric sampling the technique of black performativity in the interest of unproblematically dispositive of assertion of internal difference complexity or syntax which is always everywhere to us so apparent that the assertion is a kind of self-indulgent self-expulsory superfluous fluidity. Such assertions amount to an attempt to refute claims of blackness is atomic simplicity that were never actually serious enough to refute as they were made unfalsifiably without evidence by way of unreasonable but reasonable. The wholly rationalized motivations and bad faith and dogmatic slumber becomes itself the dismissal of blackness. This appeal to technique is a self-technical regulation of governments that the innate ideology of uplifts up. Such instrumentality can very quickly turn sour or be turned in the interest of the empire, artists against artists, and art in the interest of gold, which ready-made provenance of certain New York intellectuality. The state of mind of the United States of exception of unoriginal gangsters of the American century who stole modern art for the ones who stole away as modern art. There's nothing wrong with us precisely insofar as there is something wrong with us, something ungovernably fugitive living in us that is constantly taken for the pathogen it instantiates. What are the politics about being ready to die? What is the premature death? Some people want us to run, some people want to run, other things want to run. Knowledge of freedom is the invention of escape is stolen, life-stinging within the confines of the form of the break. There's nothing wrong with us. The fat ones, the ones who are all out of compass, the ones who are not conscious when they listen to Les Buchanan, the ones who manage to evade self-management in the end culture, the ones without interest who bring about the noise of new general interest by refusing, the ones who refuse to stand on solid ground, plotted on ground of politics to surround, refuse to teach technique, refuse to ask the police to clean up the streets, teach without lessons without payment in depth to reach yourself. In crisis and death, your children refuse to teach. Need technique, tectonic plate shifting, collapsing, speculating with my comments about what kind of conspiracies we cannot imagine about. Being broke without credit, asking for change without change. Issues of invoices and voices, bills and bankruptcy, Hardy and Tim. We've been speculating. They say that our speculation is going to make things worse. We keep speculating. We're on the couch on the corner in the bar at the stove speculating. We are speculating with others. We're in a debt, bad debt with others. We've been speculating, banking on each other. We've been counting on others, speculating about them. Our speculation is scattered among others, valid among others. We owe a debt that is not to be paid, a debt we cannot calculate, a debt at a distance, a debt without credit, a debt without end. It's a queer debt, a black debt, a type of debt that plays with us and plays within us. They say that we can't speculate that. We aren't ready, not qualified, too low, too base. They say we speculate like we have some kind of plan, but they say we have no plan. We can have no plan because we have no policy. What's your alternative? What's your policy? They say you're sitting around speculation as though like speculating is going to lead to something. Do we know what we're doing? Have we really thought about it through the imagined consequences? We need to imagine a different world. They tell us you need to imagine change. You need to change. You need to be changed. You need to come up with a plan or policy and stop acting like you already have a plan. But we just keep speculating. It's true, of course. We have a plan, and the plan is that we are going to keep speculating. The plan is that we are going to stay in debt to each other, debt and deep in each other. The plan started yesterday, and the plan will start again tomorrow before dawn after dark when they turn around. But right now, I'm going to sit here and speculate with my baby because I don't care if they're going to say that there's something wrong with us. They're going to say that there's something wrong with us. We're not following the policy, the family policy, the national policy, the policy debate. We're not keeping up with that policy. Will have to be made for us. Speculation is not for us. We need to be booked up to credit repair rate. We need to put our debt to work, they say, and stop speculating. Get work, get more work. Start to say, save for your family, save for your family. Stop speculating with your lives, but we keep speculating for death, speculating abjectly for joy among ourselves, among everyone. No, we do not need to give credit where it's due. Be reasonable, be realistic, work and work for chase. They tell us, but our speculation is wild. Our speculation grows. It grows in the undercommon, on the border, in the prison, and the subcritical kinship of the next plan. And you study, but you don't graduate. You don't take the test. You study and you speculate. We need to be accredited, they say, given credit. We need to match our credit to our debts. We study to speculate. That this study puts us in debt with others, among others, in speculation out of control. It's a cultural problem, political problem. We are too dependent on others for our survival. They say we are not self-reliant. We are not prepared to take the risk. We are putting others at risk. We are at risk. This is a dangerous speculation, irresponsible, depending on others, building up this debt, speculating with others. Where will it all lead? We don't know where it all will lead. Clearly, they say that they are going that we are not going to provide an alternative, a vision, imagine a different future. We are not reasonable, not ready for governance, not ready to participate, to express our individuality, to be objective, to be out of control of our, to be control of our future. Policies will have to be made. The future will have to be secure for us. It's dangerous to speculate. We hear time for some regulation to control this speculation. Time for some imagination to come up with an alternative. But it's too late. Speculation is rife. And we've got conspiracy against our lives, against the ones who have been owned and own nothing but debt and plotless speculation without coins. Hardy and Dysentery 2013. Today is not possible to live except by way of conspiracy, but equally it's impossible to live today by way of a plot. To live now, to create multi-life forms of life, we must seek a conspiracy without a plot. A conspiracy that has its own end, a conspiracy for itself. This conspiracy cannot produce a new person, a new world, a new subjectivity, a new consciousness, and much less it can conform to the plot of others, the plot of the police. This conspiracy can only produce more of itself. Those who enter this conspiracy without a plot produce themselves through a kind of complicity that takes sides against any plot and any attempt to plot a path to future, or others for oneself against the police who are called into being by the plot. Complicity is the mode of living and makes us unsafe by unmaking ourselves, that makes us sick to unmake ourselves, to put ourselves in danger, and we are in danger. This danger is the implication of the caretaking of the study of complicity as an available radical sociality, an experiment conducted within and against ourselves, a constant invention of the forms of sociality. No, not its plot. Our complicity in this is a conspiracy is what makes the police rotten. This complicity provokes the rot. The contamination of law, driven insane, made vicious by this conspiracy without a plot. Police make news, laws on the spot, on the body, out of fear, out of paranoia. So we've been speculating a speculation for a conspiracy without a plot. Sound variegated beneath it. Sound variegated beneath it. Sound variegated beneath it. Sound variegated beneath it.
Why don't NEG?
What's the question?
Why vote negative?
I don't know yet. I mean, the debate hasn't happened, so.
Have you suggested a reason the judges should reject the AFF?
Probably not. I don't know. Like, are you gonna ask real questions now?
Is there a reason the app is bad?
Who's to know? I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't.
Is there some portion of the app that's giving you this indeterminacy, or you are just have no formulation of what the app did? Or
Why does the AFF have to be a stasis point for our indeterminacy? Like, I'm not getting the line of questions, literally.
I mean, it's not about your indeterminacy, it's about the debate we're about to have. What are we about to debate about?
I honestly don't know. The debate has not happened, so how can I calculate what the debate is going to be?
You don't.
Okay. Who is the they in the sentence, they say we can't speculate?
Those who are saying that we cannot take a policy or a theoretical position of speculation, and so an indeterminacy. So
Okay.
whoever that they is, I can't map out specifically. Like
In that response,
George Washington
in that
was
response to the
they.
word "those," is that referring to people or institutions or ideologies or
I
literatures?
think it's fluid in that question. Like, I'm not going to say that it is solely bodies who perform it, or that is solely structures and bodies through those structures perform it. I think there's a fluidity to that question.
There's a fluidity to the "those" that you're referring
So I
to
think
of the
that
people
those
who
can
are the ones that
encapsulate-
they say we
I
can't
think that
speculate.
those can encapsulate theoretical positions, that those can encapsulate ideologies of actual bodies, that those can encapsulate like actual structures
Okay,
or spaces. It's a fluidity to
So in terms of those things that you just listed, could you relate any of them to the current debate space that we're in?
What's the question? Because I feel like this is going back to...
You just listed a bunch of things that was the they in the sentence in the 1 and C. They say we can't speculate. I'm asking you to relate those things that you just isolated to the space that we're in right now.
I just have a very hard... I feel like I have like, it's hard for me to isolate the debate space as a unique instance of they saying our speculation is bad solely because that policing and regulation of speculation is not in a form of violence that is inherent or sort of encapsulated by this space solely. And so giving an example within the debate space is problematic to that question because it is always and already walking through the door of this hotel room, walking out, coming back in, and so I can't give you like an instance. You have any questions?
We're good. We're good. You pass me the token.
It doesn't beep or anything.
It's
It's
pretty
pretty sketchy, so just like make sure it starts.
We'll see.
Doesn't have any feedback on the button.
It can still happen.
At the end, when I don't know, I'm just gonna put stuff everywhere.
Well, there's someone's, whose phone is that?
It's mine.
Steve's? Watching out for you.
Thanks.
Let me know when y'all are set. Yep. Just in one picture. Yeah, there wasn't an order previously. I don't think you expect one, do you? I'm gonna go straight down.
The 1AC has presented a rhetorical criticism of discourse of marijuana that analyzes the intersecting systems of power that allow rhetoric to connect itself to material reality. The thesis that the 1AC forwards in the field of communications and rhetoric is that of the ideograph, the fusion of the material and the symbolic that allows an explanation of Foucault's thesis of power and knowledge being interpenetrating systems of world shaping. The polysemous texts that the 1AC analyzes are images that allow us to develop affective responses that allow us to juxtapose those responses together. The proposition or the presentation of the piece of FBN propaganda about Moloch contrasted with the Coca-Cola ad produces an understanding that would never be taken away individually from them, which is a uniquely valuable form of analysis that the 1AC has produced. It contrasts the acceptability of the use of cocaine even as a safe drug for children in turn-of-the-century America, while the use of marijuana was used to bestialize and demonize black and other minority people in America because it was as seen as a moral alteration to their character that made them violent and want to lust after white women. Our presentation is inherently valuable. We have produced unique scholarship on the topic, which is good. We think that if our scholarship is good, you can vote affirmative because we have produced a beginning point for a discussion that could have turned into a discussion about the topic that can educate us, enlighten us about the world, and allow us to take rhetorical strategies out into the world to combat the systems of power that we must navigate in our everyday existence. The negative has the burden to rejoin the 1AC. We have the burden of proof to provide an argument that is a form of advocacy in some way, which is what the 1AC has done. The 1NC doesn't challenge this. You shouldn't allow them to say that we didn't in the 2NC. Now, this criticism is predicated on the 2AC refusing or problematizing the 1NC, but we will choose not to problematize blackness or the noise of the 1NC as a valuable rhetorical strategy, but those must exist. There must exist multiple rhetorics. Swenson, in 2008, no word is entire of itself. All parts of it are all words are part of the main ideologies of materialist theory, philosophy of myth, and symbolic theory, not contradictory description, social consciousness. The two philosophies seek to describe as found in the fusion of the material and the symbolic, and the ideograph. Rhetorical theory is not valueless assumptions guide and direct theorizing by providing a heuristic framework for us to decipher, which heuristic framework offers the highest quality perspective of explaining given phenomenon, proposed problematization rather than specific answers. I do not seek a totalizing methodological conclusion, but rather a domain of acts, practices, and thoughts that seem to pose a problem for politics. Both the material and symbolic positions presuppose a fundamental falsity of the metaphor of social organism to settle the polemic between the material and symbolic systems. McGee describes the ideograph as a trick of the mind which deludes us into believing what we think with through for a society to which we belong. The rhetorical force, the ideograph, must be taken as a centered origin. Human control and power are both external forces which allow rhetoric through the ideographic usage to cause ideology. McGee urges the critic to search for a common denominator. Ideographs are paramorphic, retains a formal categorical meaning and constant reference to its history as an ideograph. The self-same kernel of meaning is always understood in relation to another. The political language which manifests ideology seems characterized by slogans. The vocabulary of ideographs reveals interpenetrating systems or structures of public motives. Such structures appear to be diachronic and synchronic patterns of political consciousness which have the capacity both to control power, to influence, if not determine the shape and texture of each individual's reality. When was the structure of ideographs created so that they could gain powers? Rhetorical forces. He appeals to history to define an ideograph. In real discourse, there are forces. The ideograph is descriptive of an essentially social human condition. This is not a traditional permutation argument, but instead a challenge to the negative, that they must challenge the concept of the 1AC or an argument that we have forwarded. This is a debate round and not just a scholastic discussion that happens in an insular vacuum. We must be able to generate a point of stasis or clash between where the two teams can disagree on what to disagree about. Swenson, another permutation card, Swenson, 2008. The foundation and stabilizing principle for defining mass consciousness is found in a system of ideograph structure, always seeks to define the universal at the center, always takes its repetitions, substitutions, transformations, and permutations from a history of meaning, whose origin may be reawakened or whose always anticipated in the form of presence. This centers the determination of being and presence in all senses of the word. Derrida calls this the metaphysics of presence. Either we ignore Genesis and preserve universality, or we ignore universality and formulate a philosophy of Genesis for the ideograph, rather than negotiating the undecidability between the two bipolar elements. McGee allows Western metaphysics to take over viewing material and ideal from a perspective of polarity, which show a baseline tension between the two, but as Derrida points out, the relationship between real and phantasmic, the specter is not so stable. The ideograph is predicated on a system of dualities that make partial truths into covering laws. There is no outside text. The critical import is that the subject of the rhetorical situation always perceives the rhetorical event as a preconstituted essential. Creative rhetors craft their ideographs, meaning and use as they employ them in public discourse to persuade audiences of the public nature of historically specific beliefs and actions. The structure of the ideograph binds any new ideographic use to a radical historicity. The creative rhetor is always constituted by prior ideographic usages, and the audience is equally constituted by the same capacity to control powers at play in each new rhetorical situation. Social control is control over consciousness. The a priori influence that learned predispositions hold over human agents. Social control is fundamentally rhetorical, making the power of rhetoric and control, power of anterior influence. Ideographs are always a reflection of what is always already constructed. Multiple rhetorics is key to an understanding of persuasion that allows us to take that skill into the world to persuade people who disagree with us about changing the way that they view power, politics, and culture and ethics. All of these things all of these kinds of persuasion are only accessible through a theory that allows multiple rhetorical strategies is a form of flexibility where we can waffle between different discourses of both obedience and power. Visual argument is valuable intrinsically, Lake and Pickering in 1998. Presentational forms convey their meaning in a gestalt, not a linear form. Images do not present their constituents successfully but simultaneously. Images cannot be decoded via semantic. They present to the eye a complex of traits that can be decoded via only their internal relations. Even the sheer positives of nature are thoroughly infused with the negatives of discourse, so that even our apprehension of images is contaminated by the ideas we hold about these images. Visual arguments can be said usefully to refute one another, even though they do not, strictly speaking, negate one another. Such refutation can be accomplished in at least 3 ways. 1, through dissection, in which an image is broken down discursively. 2, through substitution, in which one image is replaced within a larger visual frame by a different image with an opposing polarity. And 3, through transformation, in which an image is recontextualized in a new visual frame. Now, sandbagging, you prepped before this debate and knew what affirmative we were reading. We gave you the entire text of the 1AC and intended to have a in-depth debate about the topic, about the perspective on the topic that we have taken. When we are affirmative, we get to begin the discussion, which means that our starting point should be used to continue the discussion. When you are affirmative, you get the same privilege. You know what you're going to do. Keeping the other team in the dark as a performance of unintelligibility is a form of trickery that attempts to minimize clash and force the 1AR to take on too much of a load from the block to handle, which means that you should give us a huge amount of strategic leeway in 1AR new explanations. Now, there is intrinsic value to the affirmative's rhetoric on marijuana as well, Lipset and Halleck has in 9. In the discussion of marijuana coverage in the Pacific that follows, 3 contrasting images of the national citizen are at play. In colonial French Polynesia, while the state is cast melodramatically by the news media, the citizen is muted by Polynesian papers to depict citizen and state in a relationship of mutual support. In Papua New Guinea newspapers, reputations of the citizens are both critical and supportive of the state, while representation in France, Polynesia is governed as a part of the French state. Marijuana was reported to be a growing problem there associated with juvenile crime. Distinctive about coverage of the drug in the French colony was the media's preoccupation with the state as if the national subject had no voice or agency. The agency of police officers figured prominently in narratives in which they were only described as hunting or making discoveries. One headline declared the ninjas took their attack to marijuana, while police in French Polynesia received favorable attention. These government agents are shown to act alone, powerfully, confidently, and cheerfully about their way to success. The colonial state appears to administer the law effectively without compromise or implicit or explicit expression of custody by the nation. These stories privilege the state, despite highlighting what amounted to little more than ceremonial police actions. They silence the national subject while portraying marijuana as a great problem in French Polynesia. Recognition of its relatively mild effects is acknowledged by state officials who aim to rehabilitate the bodies of citizens. Coverage excluded the voices of past and present users, medical professionals, other citizens of the nation. French Polynesian newspapers' marijuana coverage thus distinguishes its legitimate offices by name and quotation in an unequivocal, audibly paternalistic register. By contrast, the citizenry are given very little voice except implicitly as compromising the legal integrity of the state through production and consumption of practices through largely media by the press. The nation is seen as adhering to the state's authority in this sense. The stereotypical modern state with its legal apparatus of enforcement and spectacle remains legible and operative, albeit a rather melodramatic form in the American Protectorate's marijuana-related articles narrate a slightly more problematic relationship between the sovereignty of the state and the nation. Unlike French Polynesia, both retain greater autonomy and local administration, likewise have reduced representation within the United States. In contrast to French Polynesian press, in particular, marijuana-related crime was the criminals were discriminated by age and gender rather than being given no face. The nation recognized in the media began enforcement and classificatory abilities of the state. Not only did the presence of the dog unit story highlight the policing of Law's borders that served to warn potential offenders of the new state's power to canine detection and suggested its ability to regulate illegal traffic was not static but becoming more effective. Members of the nation thus portrayed together as a police team. The nation was depicted so loyal and going to have to portray in other accounts to emphasize the significant role of the nation-police relations. These articles contrast a rational citizen kinsman who upheld and supported the state over primordial ties and use of traffic drugs in accordance with government policy. The former are anonymous and amenity for the nation. The latter, so the state's authority specifically named for representation of activism. These stories surely contrast the mute citizen found in the French Polynesian press. This modernist image of the national citizen extends beyond the incidents. Reports the story suggesting whatever ethical shadow of consumption might cast upon the nation and the states without blemish more than regulating government employees. Such testing was also seen as a settling standard for citizens. The alternative can't possibly solve the affirmative. They have not presented an argument that explains in a way that we can directly clash and respond to what it is that they have done. Obviously, this is part of their strategy. We would just have liked to have a discussion or a debate. I have one. Jackie brought it.
Anyone like the cheeseburgers?
Veggie? Just eat it and describe it to me. It was got vegetables.
No. This one doesn't beep though. Murr.
It's just
You want a burger?
You want a burger?
Who's gonna say no?
But cheese on it, it's
Hold the timer, get a burger.
That's so sweet.
just so I can eat through with you, because I always see food takes my life. Covered in real people.
It's not the first time I've been told that.
Really? It doesn't surprise me. Natalie told me last week and she helped me refine my baking skills. I feel like I'm okay at cooking because it's a little bit more intuition and like tasting the process. I mess everything.
Yeah, I can't. I'm really shitty at baking.
I don't measure things as badly.
Yeah, it's cooking is more of an art, and baking is more of a science.
That makes sense. I'm not good at that.
Cooking wise, like I'm a very, like you said, intuitive cook too. I don't use a whole lot of recipes. I kind of just taste what food is and going again.
And most of my recipes are just like a list of what I use, and not so much how much or at what point.
None?
I think I want to see that. The 1NC is endless speculation to conspire against the plot of the affirmative, which is a plan to receive payment, a policy to receive credit for us being in debt, for us being broke, for the brokenness of blackness itself. Now this only allows for self-regulation and invites the police into our living rooms in terms the affirmative. So you will go to the link argument. The 1AC tells us that we are in a financial crisis, as Harney indicates that there's the green eye monster, that there's a propaganda of the drug war, that there are some problems here with blackness, that they are criminalized. Now this, and therefore that we can move towards some kind of insurance policy, that we can go outside of the world and make changes and get on and find our way on someone's payment plan, that we can receive credit and fix the rate of our fix the rate of our interest in our debt, and that this and that you as the adjudicator can sign off on what Hardy calls a family plan via their permutation pieces, their Swanson pieces of evidence. Of our argument further is that it is through the 1AC's act of teaching, the act of projecting all of these images for you to consume, that we might be better off, that we can one day be saved, and have the savings to live on. Have the savings to live on. The 1AC is a genealogy of marijuana that allows for affect, but this affect is only the affect of the police. Now our argument further is that this posits us as a problem. That is their argument that their argument about how does the theory and the pedagogy that we perform in this space go matriculate outside of this, from how do we come back to the social world. Now they have said that we have a burden to rejoin them, that how this is also an insistence of a plot, an insistence of the stasis point. I think the 2AC actually uses those words. Now he says that we do not problematize that of blackness. That is our argument that we must problematize, that we must speculate, that we must study and trouble the status quo axiom that has oriented our thought, has oriented black study, that oriented black study and the criminality of the black body. Now their argument about reputation good is also a link to this argument that there needs to be a stasis locus point, that there needs to be some policy that one can cling to, that one can lay claim to. Our argument further is our argument that we have to move over, that we have to have a movement to give, we have to have a movement to give us have a movement away from this to give us some form of answer. Now there, now the 1AR is going to say that society is not, that society doesn't exist. Society that meaning is not fixed. That the society is an object. However, that is not the 1AC. The 1AC does not say society exists there. 1AC is in fact a recognition that society does exist, that you can see images of it, you can see traces of it, you can see traces of blackness as criminality, blackness as cancerous, blackness as the green-eyed monsters, and that you three as the judges should consume that. You should consume their form of pedagogy. Now, their form of pedagogy, and the actual textual moment of the 1AC is that history is required, that these things these things are required for you. That this so do not let them shift the 1AC that this is not the affirmative, because the affirmative recognizes that history exists, that we can develop that we can develop the politics and the politics to navigate to navigate the social world. Now, instead of an insistence on ameliorating our debt to the world, the negative conspires against the market, conspires against credit, and a refusal to invest any more labor within the industry of the 1AC, the industry of propagating images of black as object, black as hurt. Now, though it is through a fugitivity from the affirmative that we are able to posit the uncertain and new axiom that there is nothing wrong with us, that it is this uncertain position that is the plotless initiation of a new mode of thought, a new mode of study, that is to say pedagogy. Now they're going to see that their 1AC is point is good for education, that all of these things are one is not only a desire to cling to the stasis point of the plot, but also is a lie, that the status quo tells us that blackness as object, blackness as hurt, that we that is the axiom that derives our study and derives our pedagogy, our mode what evidence indicates? So I asked this, begs the question of what happens when we trouble that notion. What happens when we forward our pedagogy based on the premise that there is nothing wrong with us, that there, now ACE points that there really ain't shit wrong with us. No, it indicates that the affirmative is a kind of self-indulgent, self-exculpatory technique or project that seeks to refute claims of blackness that as atomic simplicity that were never really actually serious enough to refute, as they were made unfalsifiably without evidence by way of one reason and wholly rationalized motivations and bad faith and dogmatic slumbers. That these claims that they play, the clips that they play at the top of the 1AC were never substantiated to begin with. Don't give them value by positing them in this space that I putting you as the adjudicator to sign off on their truth claim, but being the point is that even if you decide to voyeuristically intervene and reject our new axiom that there is nothing wrong with this, you are only supercharging the impact, which I'll get to below. But one, your action becomes in itself a dismissal of blackness as per our Moen argument. And second is that it steals us away into the terrorizing alienation of the past in the present. Now, as the 1AC score describes, that we need a history genealogy as prescribed by Foucault, that we need this temporal line to return to. That 1AC, the negative, is a troubling of that notion. This makes transcendence impossible and replicates the violence of the status quo. Means you vote neg on presumption. This also means that you must rigorously suspend your desire to be compelled into belief and persuasion that the 1AC, though your reluctance to do this is what a conspiracy against the plot is supposed to feel like. How, as a judge, do I refuse to sign off on ameliorating the black suffering, ameliorating the problems of social policy on the black body? Our argument is that there is nothing wrong with us. The idea that there is something wrong with us means that that this is not a classroom. That this is not a classroom. The axiom that there is something wrong with us, that means that this is actually a hospital. That we are broken and that we are broken and we need fixing. That means that they don't access any of these pedagogy claims. That also means that pedagogy claims are Fanon describes this fugitivity from history fugitivity in its conclusion after writing about Afro-pessimistic thought, after writing about black as object, black as fungible. He said that he said that we have to forget history. He says that I do not carry the innocence appointed to belief, appeals of reason, respect, humanity, dignity, after alter reality, pass away in the present moment, the present moment, the Negro, in a sense, makes himself abnormal, however sincere, slaying centuries of past, those who Negroes, white men, will now who refuse to let themselves be sealed away to maintain the tower of the past. This alienation will come to being through a refusal to accept the present as definitive. I should constantly remind myself it is not the real, leave the instruction of action existence endlessly, creating myself part of being I am part of being to the degree that I go beyond it. Negro literature can absolutely do nothing to change this society turn black and human voices with respect to ancestors in order to be authentic communication to be possible to open up the door to every new conscious making way of personal questions. Now the argument, our argument further is that the police is that entity that asks that offers you coffee, at the door, that asks you questions about your history. That hey, you have a history of sexual assault, you have a history of violence, you have a history of petty theft. That is the same policing it is the history of black bodies that allows for the policing of those black bodies. And so a refusal of the history is necessary to produce a new axiom, a new position of study this dare you continue to study is uncommon to make with my market from beyond the party from and turn beyond self-determination, beyond the plot itself. The role of the police is to organize the plot, organize the affect others and themselves through the ubiquity of governance is one. On the one hand, on the other hand, governance tries to plot who stay plot those who stay not on market here.
What is your amelioration of debt claim? I don't understand this argument at all.
Well, maybe we should speculate about that.
Okay. What does vote negative on presumption mean?
There's nothing wrong with us. There's nothing wrong with blackness. There's no reason to invest any more labor in the stasis point of the 1AC.
So, all that said, everyone can just sign a ballot negative, have a good day. What is the connection between voting neg and what you just said? We're in a competitive activity.
We are not.
These
We are in a
judges are deciding
hospital
who
as
gets
per the
to
1AC.
gets to
As per the
members.
1AC, we are in a hospital. This is not a classroom. This is not a competitive activity. This is a hospital under the interpretation of the 1AC.
Under the interpretation of the 1AC, this is a hospital?
The implications of the 1AC means that there is debt to be paid, there is credit to be received, that this is that all of these things that I am broke, therefore need fixing, transform this not into an academic space, not into a classroom, but into a hospital.
Can you give me an example of how the 1AC does that?
That's like the entirety, that's like the top part. Like I'm doing that all throughout the, well, once you're.
What I'm saying is that from what I just listened to, I still do not understand what you're arguing.
Okay, it's the imaging of the green-eyed monster, the imaging of the wildered beast.
Yeah,
all
how
of
does
these,
that mean that you need to be fixed?
Our argument is that the status quo says that that is the image of black as object. That image justifies this voyeuristic savior complex that says that let me clean you up, let me develop a theory for you, let me develop a social theory that we can take outside of this
So you
world.
believe that the
Our
way that-
argument is that there is nothing wrong with us, and there is nothing to be fixed. So that transformed, and that axiom should develop.
Doesn't
or
this
should,
link argument rely on the reaction that the judges had to the 1AC's presentation being I need to fix the negative?
excuse me?
Doesn't your link argument rely on the three judges having a reaction to the 1AC that is identical to your link argument?
No, our argument is not. Our argument is that there is a new axiom that is introduced before the pedagogy. So the negative rejects the stasis point of the 1AC and says instead of the 1AC we conspire against it and develop a new axiom, a new truth claim through which we therefore derive further theory about the resolution. So the truth claim post 1AC is that there is nothing wrong with us. Moten indicates that what happens when that theory becomes the foundation of black study, of black thought.
So
we can.
Your entire argument is predicated on you winning that we have made you into the problem, correct?
I mean, maybe it isn't. It might change, it might not change. I can't really tell you like what the argument's gonna look like.
All right, cool. Why not? Yeah, we got food there. We asked if we had food.
First, I'm going to finish the horny and dysentery evidence where GD left off their mark. Who live outside of the plot? The governance must play the good cop that the governance lies in the wait and closing itself in an affect and ask, what do you want? What are your interests? Give us your voice, your input. Tell us what you think, who you are, and then it offers us a cigarette and a cup of coffee to be turned loose, turned out onto the street. It's to face the bad cop, the vigilante, the maker of policy, to make policy for those in the conspiracy without a plot. Those who consider not to be a single being, not to be one detached from government, even from governmentality. It is a role in every day. Now into the permutation debate. The affirmative does not get a permutation A because because one normative competition of affirmative deployment of permutation assumes a non-sequitur plan versus plan counterplan theory of competition, which would normally require trade-off links. However, this notion of competition is incompatible for the kind of debate because their scholarship does not give way to that kind of negative ground or literature base. Instead, our interpretations that you view the debate as distinct pedagogy versus pedagogy because the focal point of 1AC is not some hypothetical enactment through which we can generate causal disadvantages or alternative actor counterplans, but rather a claim to a particular form of knowledge politics. One is competitive equity. We have not read framework, nor have we demanded that they defend the literal words of resolution, which makes them inherently wildly unpredictable. This means that at very least you should revoke their entitlement to a permutation. This is why being the negative in these kinds of left versus left debates is always skewed toward the affirmative. Second is the education claims. Their interpretation of competition justifies the worst parts of conservative, progressive, critical theory like a radical negation, Nietzsche passivity, victimization, refusal. This over-limits literature, which is inherently bad for critical education and debate because it stifles potential for the synthesis of new innovative theory and scholarship. B is starting points. The affirmative, that the affirmative has strategically and intentionally started their politics and cited history to tell you about marijuana-related violence, while the negative is situated at the scholarship, the queer survival, the queer survival of black poetics, of tired poetics, of kind of black maternity. This means that for the affirmative, the fulcrum of the debate in the 1AC was the production of rhetorical analysis and not the negative argument. Now, this is problematic, one, because that's severance there. In inclusion and severance, the primary epistemic position of the 1AC when they respond at the top of the 2AC that we won't problematize blackness. Now, this turns their education of the 1AC itself, because the debate becomes less about the merits of the affirmative, more about whether or not we problematize or not about the affirmative can fit within the framework of the negative. Don't forget the 1AC, don't forget the top of the 2AC when they said that we, in quotations, will not problematize blackness. Now, second is the abandonment argument. The fact that they decide to segment their commitment to the affirmative means that they will abandon the practice of their politics at the site of any new theory in academic capital. This is the point where they have that bind, where they say that we will not problematize blackness, and yet we will go for a permutation because these rhetorical analyses can exist in tandem. Now, this probably turns the case because it means that the affirmative will maintain governance over black objects through a permutation, shifts its implication of propaganda. They recreate an image of propaganda that the black objects pathologize. Therefore, we show you images as a corrective antidote to that blackness. And three is the outcomes. The ends does not justify the means, even if the endpoints, either affirmative and negative, are the same. The 1AC already indicated that the method or approach or framing of those ends, which should be affirmed. Any deviation from this is also a form of severance. And four, combination is not unchanging. Affirmative plus negative does not equal affirmative, and your ballot should not reflect that form of equation. Instead, an actual combination will create a new performance that neither team can defend at this present moment. It's literally a form of double consciousness. They're saying, do not problematize blackness. Jide's speech is all about problematizing the view of black objecthood or objectivity. They say we need to place the black body or the black object within a social, subjective frame. That's the double consciousness argument. Also, the permutation hypercharges the link two ways. First, is this what you can flow as the brokenness DA. The affirmative's call for advocacy is a further rectification of her bodies within a particular social political climate. The permutation is that once again an affirmation that yes, the bodies we speak for are criminal. The images that we showed you paint those bodies as criminal, but this is it's through this proclamation that really says something is wrong with that body. Now, the Reed's evidence. I'm going to read this Reed's evidence. This is that call to put the black body back within a social framing of broken. Therefore, the affirmative is affixed to that. Is the question of whether or not black objects have access to forms of humanism or social rectification. Now, this is literally the part where they say we need a subjective lens to view these forms of violence. Reason 12. Black is alien or foreign opinion grafted onto the subjunctively imagined speaking commodity is not human. It is a subjectivity. Objects not humans that the subject subjunctively imagined commodity. Disorderly, funky, reprobate, potentially diseased. Black body infects the polis, affects the state. Analysis reinscribes the supremacy of the modern and the enlightenment notion of the human discussion under the rubric of the human or the making of the human position. This discourse. The black object is object becoming human. The objection of the black object is cleansed, thus pushing up the exploration of the black object's ontology and epistemology to the margins. Objects can and do resist. Blackness troubles, subverts, and challenges the relationship between the legal and philosophical category of human and the notion of subjectivity. The human never existed. We have never been human. We have never been modern. And the second portion to this is you can flow it as the policing disadvantage. That the permutation is also a call for a clear ordering or a line of progression in the grand narrative. A call to a plot to be re-ejected into this discussion. There, rhetorical analysis of the form of this plot. Now, the Hardy and Disadiri 13 evidence indicate that it's through this fetishization of the plot with a stable story that allows for policing for those who want to regulate our broken bodies to analyze our plot and produce a counter narrative to our forms of resistance, our survival that will continually see us dead. Now, the affirmative's unwillingness to let go of the narrative, to let go of the representations of the 1AC, which says says that history starts at the 1930 images that we show you of blackness. There's a reason why they don't access the conversation.
10 minutes.
Didn't know that's who you're creating.
Panel full of some seriously heinous human being.
No, no.
404 left. Oh, I'll just use that one. Sorry, my flows are just ridiculous. What's where? I'm trying to make this coherent for you all.
I think the rest of us have been flowing straight down.
I was saying I want one of those big rolls of like poster paper, and I can just like keep only ever
Just
flowing
only down.
and then like crawl back up it to figure out the debate.
Flow in a circle.
I will do anyway, I don't know.
Time is a circle.
Time is a cube.
Turn my clothes into a Mobius strip?
Some of those dudes from the fort back in the day would flow. Like, in terms of like arguments, and then they'd like create nodes going up. So it like it wasn't linear. It was just like arguments are like branches.
I remember Shanahan describing it once. He was like, the arguments will rise to the top. And I've always envisioned it like 3D. They will. They'll right off.
No, you're just gonna drop a bunch of shit.
Okay. This will do.
That'll do.
Sure.
Huh? Oh, the computer? Yeah, I think it'll. Sure. All right. Anyone not ready? The 1AC is a rhetorical critique of marijuana that analyzes power. Power and knowledge are sutured by the concept of the ideograph, which bridges partial truths with myth to create the law, like Anslinger's rhetoric leading to the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937. The affirmative is good scholarship that uses polysemous forms of rhetoric in order to create a new reading of the surface fragments of history. This gives us, as scholars, the portable skills necessary to become good advocates when we leave the debate space. This is my Tyus and my Montero evidence. Now, 1AR sandbagging argument is going to be flat at the top. I shouldn't have to do any work here because Leonard already built this Lego castle. 1NC didn't engage with the affirmative, was vague in cross-examination, then held back all their good link arguments until the 2NC. The impact of this argument is that you give Leonard leeway when he's doing app nuance in the 2AR because I'm not going to be able to fit a 2AC into this speech. Link debate. First is the piece of Harvey evidence. The affirmative is not an amelioration. I'm Jewish, I would know now. The second argument is this 1AC's teaching. The 1AC is actually more of a reading. We don't prescribe how you should interpret the images. We just tell you our reading of them. The idea of the next link argument is the affirmative is an act of policing. There's no link. I don't understand the warrant of this argument. Policing generally requires some sort of disciplinary power. How is the 1AC an act of disciplinary power upon the black body? Now, extend the burden to rejoin argument. The 1AC is a form of advocacy. Your answer to our argument are framed like we're arguing some sort of MSU stasis point framework argument. We're just saying that the 1AC presented testable arguments and testable visual or rhetoric claims that you can create counter warrants to. There's a reason to vote negative. Now the the last link argument is that the 1AC is a recognition of that society actually exists. No, the last three sentences of the 1AC is that society is an impossible object and only exists through the ideograph of social order, which is what the 1AC criticizes. The affirmative recognizes history exists insofar as that we retell that history to become better scholars. Now, permutation debate. Your theory of competition doesn't make any sense to me. Our theory of competition is that if the next scholarship is the question of the permutation is simply, is the next scholarship a reason the AFF scholarship was bad? Their framework of pedagogy versus pedagogy is impossible to weigh. What is the value of a pedagogy? What determines how pedagogies are useful? Now, what knowledge do you produce that shapes advocacy skills? I don't understand. We set up that advocacy skills are what is necessary to make debate have impact in the real world. The first two arguments about competitive faculty and education are not applicable to my interpretation because I solved them. The next argument is a starting point argument. It is impossible to separate things like the war on drugs from race, class, gender, history, and power, which means that starting point is a bad hermeneutic for the reform of rhetorical and analysis in the debate that we're having right now, the severance argument, we're not going to sever out of one line of the 1A. Oh, yeah, sure, we'll sever out of one line of the 1A and 2AC where he said we're not going to problematize blackness because you didn't even explain to us that that was what your alternative is initially. You should reject the severance argument due to the 1A or sandbagging argument, the abandonment argument. We're not abandoning a single line of the 1AC. The 1AC is good and awesome. There's no, additionally, it's not what our permutation theory is. The 1AC is still good, absent asking the question, did the 1NC negate the affirmative? Now, the double consciousness argument, double consciousness is at the heart of a spectral thing. It is the haunting of the black subject. The 1AC does not force black subjects into a culture or a social frame. Rather, the theory of ideograph says that we are all trapped in both the material and the symbolic at the same time, both in and outside of society at the same time. Now, the next argument is the call to order argument. The next argument is the call to order argument, that the 1AC is a call to order, but rather the problem is that the ballot is a call to order, which is an irresolvable paradox, which means that the ballot, as the ultimate call to order, even if you do your strategy of unintelligibility, it will inevitably be intelligibized and interpolated by these three critics in an hour, which non-uniques your offense. The brokenness and policing disadvantage group them, I answered them back up on the link debate. They don't. Additionally, my permutation theory of does the negative pedagogy negate the affirmative?
Swinson.
Okay. I'll extend Swinson, the Swinson 98 evidence, the Swinson 08 evidence on the permutation. The Swinson evidence says that ideographs are what fuses the material and the symbolic, which is why rhetorical analysis is what gives us the necessary tools to be able to challenge ideology, the status quo. Think of World War II, the poster of Rosie the Riveter. That is much more of an iconic thing that sticks with you and sticks in your memory more so than like a World War II radio broadcast that you heard on NPR now. Another piece of dropped evidence is the Lake 98 evidence, which says that visual rhetoric is in fact testable because it allows for dissection, substitution, and transformation of the images, which means you could have done all of those as forms of counter warrants. Additionally, marijuana rhetoric is uniquely good. That's our Lipschitz 9 evidence. That's a question of how we form national subjects, and policy being dynamic means that rhetoric is a place that we can challenge politics of anti-racism in the status quo with our rhetorical analysis. Now, their Moten evidence says that they provide a new pedagogy and to characterize the affirmative as self-indulgence and atomistic. I don't understand this argument in the context of the 1AC tries to create a form of heuristics that we as scholars can use to better navigate the prevailing ideologies of domination and the status quo. If you've ever smoked a joint before, then that means the 1AC is valuable knowledge for you because it's a question of how we need to navigate the current way marijuana is policed now. They say you shouldn't value the clips of the 1AC. Why? There's no warrant to this argument. The dismissal disadvantage is not an argument. It's not that we should alienate the past into the present, but rather we should retell the past to create a new future. Now, drop down to the Fanon analysis. Quote from their evidence, refuse to be sealed away in the material tower of the past. Next quote, a real leap consists of introducing invention into existence. This is the affirmative theory of retelling of history to turn the tables on dominant power structures. We need to go back and retrace the rhetoric which created the bullshit racist laws that are on the books right now. The last argument is this policing argument. The affirmative is not asking about your history. We retell the history of marijuana. We did not challenge you to present your own past. We told a past that was resulted in racially codified laws, which were bad. We should be able to navigate those ideographs as scholars.
We all got that?
It's like 5:10.
Cool. Thank you.
Hold on, don't start it yet, please.
Bye, fish.
It's 10 more seconds then it started.
It's all good.
We were all just gonna say we're doing something like that. So.
I posted a vine of a baby pig on Natalie's wall. You should check it out if it was doing AR.
Yeah, doing that.
The 1NC is endless speculation against the plot of the affirmative, which demands that you turn your back to their images, you turn their back to their reading or writing or whatever it is, their conception of history, which is a plan to receive payment and academic capital for their positioning of some solution to the social ills of blackness. Now we do not need a material warrant. That warrant for this beyond the portable skills argument, which is a desire to move us back into subjection, a desire for us to salvage our beings in this space, and hopefully if we leave this space that we will be beings outside of this space. Our argument is that there is nothing wrong with us, and that is the axiom, the new truth claim to which we organize our theory, which means that this is a sequencing argument. They're not coming to terms with. Our argument is that maybe the affirmative might have some value, but our argument is that that value needs to be positioned, that value needs to be questioned, and that value needs to be troubled with a new axiom that says that there is nothing wrong with us, and that is precisely the moment evidence. Now they are co-conceding the hardy evidence that we are in a financial crisis, that we are in debt. Now the textual moment, I don't know what card it is specifically because the cards are 5 pages long, but it says that 50% of the violent crimes committed in this district occupied by Mexicans, Greeks, Turks, Filipinos, Spaniards, Latin Americans, and Negroes were made to be can be traced to the use of marijuana. That these racialized bodies are subject to legal violence. Our argument is that yes, we know this, but what happens if our thought experiments ask differently? What happens if our thought experiments ask a different question? Ask the same question based on a different fundamental truth claim that there is nothing wrong with us. That this turns there are education claims, because there are education and pedagogy claims, because this is not a classroom, that they have transformed this space into a hospital, that we are broken, that we need fixing, and then therefore becomes the question: what are the skills that we can develop to port them outside of this space, to port them outside of this hospital? What can we give these objects? What kind of bandages can we give these bodies so that they can walk and interact inside the world without their wounds being infected? Now our argument is that it is okay for us to be objects, it is okay for us to exist on our own behalf, and yet the affirmative is a policy only to receive credit for us being in debt, for us being broke, for the brokenness of blackness itself. This only allows for self-regulation and invites the police into our living rooms. They're not answering the brief evidence that says that the position to move objects back into subjecthood eviscerates the ontology and epistemology that comes with that object. That ontology and epistemology is able to generate a new axiom that says, I don't know, there is nothing wrong with us. Now, now you can extend the policing dissent from the 1A cross-examination as a clear instance of how policing functions in this very space. Policing functions in this hospital. What do you need? What is wrong with you? How can we engage you? How can we debate you? How can we engage negative? Now, engage negative. Now, hardening disparity evidence indicates that the police, the structure modeled against structures modeled against us first commits violence through the mode of no ability. That they know our resistance strategies because we send grievances to Congress about droning communities. In return, they increase drone usage. The reality is Greensboro, North Carolina, against all communities. In return, they increase Rally in Greensboro, North Carolina, against capitalism, returns bullets and fired for the crown's slaves. Clearly fight to be removed from the plantation. In return, they get placed in the chain gang. Now our argument is that you can move us. Let's give these slaves laws. Let's give them legal protection. Let's give them some kind of power through politics. But this does not allow for the object to continue to live the 2AC. In the 2AC, we are a critique of no ability. That the black object poetics should be incomprehensible. But further, our argument is not only about incomprehensibility. Our argument is about incomprehensibility through speculation. That we have to unknow our history and become a fugitive to it. That this is more than just a DA to the permutation is conceded. This is a conceded case term because they do not answer this in the 1AR. Even if you don't buy the method of speculation, you will vote on face value because they are not able to solve policing. That even if we trace back our genealogy, that the policing will allow that there will be still self-regulation. That is dysentery and hardy evidence. That this is also a question of form. The call for this evidence is a question of form. That how do we teach in these spaces? How do we forward our pedagogy? They are going to go for this idea that society does not exist, but that is not the 1AC. The 1AC says that society does exist, and we can trace it genealogically. We can trace it through this temporal line. We can trace it through this history. Our Fanon evidence indicates that the past can in no way guide me to the present moment. The past of black as object, black as green monster, black as subject of as victim to marijuana laws. That past cannot project us into the future. So do not buy this. There any fluidity links. There also the injection of humanism is their injection of the blackness into humanism is also our double consciousness argument, because double consciousness is how do I as a black body see myself in juxtaposition to the white body. Our argument is that those bodies never existed in the first place. You should speculate against the thought of the affirmative.
404, right?
Yeah.
Is there a piece of evidence for this hospitals link argument?
It's a poem. We didn't read the poem, but I mean, if you want to look at the poem.
No, it's okay. And then you said the question of form call for this evidence. Can I see that card you're talking about?
Yes, officer. There you go.
This is the whole card?
Yeah. I'm assuming the green is mine.
This black marking here, is that related to this debate, or is that from previous debate?
That's what I stopped in this.
Oh, yeah.
NC.
Okay.
Pretty good guard to pick.
Everyone set? The negative weak arguments are fancy spin with a metaphor attached that they refuse to particularize or trace back to a part of the debate. The 1AC is not making a hospital. We are in an educational setting. You are people who work for universities and are in a position of pedagogical power. You have influence over the way that people learn. The 1AC is a part of shaping that discourse on how we learn, which is an active part of attempting to shape our own subjectivity. We exist both inside and outside of society that constantly attempts to shape us. This is a dialectic power relationship that is interpenetrative. The 1AC is not disciplinary, nor is it police-like. We are not telling you what you can and cannot say. We're telling you that we have started a discussion about marijuana prohibition and that you brought up a non sequitur in the 1&R. We are not an insurance policy. We are not trying to ameliorate debt. We are not telling you that you lack something and thus need to be corrected. Do not get lost in the smoke and mirrors of the rhetoric of the 2&R, because a lot of it is not traceable back to a concrete part of the debate that actually makes sense in the context of the arguments the 1AC is making about law, power, rhetoric, and politics. Now extend the permutation. We have a theory of permutation that they have not responded to. They said that this is not a policy debate because we don't have a plan and perms come from counterplans. That is where they come from, but I have forwarded a theory of burden of proof and rejoinder, which demands that you must rejoin the 1AC. You must generate a form of clash, which is the negative's burden and not the affirmative's. The affirmative must provide a form of advocacy, which we have done. If we have upheld our burden and they have not, you vote affirmative on default. His starting point disagreement is not an answer to the 1AR's impact turn to the starting points argument, which was an explanation of the permutation. It doesn't make any sense to have a singular methodological starting point for rhetoric because there exist a huge differentiated types of people who come from different places, political settings, and positions of power, which means that starting points ought to be based on particularity. It demands a form of flexibility in rhetoric that allows the rhetor to become persuasive to multiple audiences, which is how they gain control over the power of influence. The piece of 2AC Swenson evidence that they are still not answering says that this power of influence is a priori the ability to control politics and shape the material reality that exists around us, which is the best way to combat power of domination. That is the base of Montero and 1AC Attias evidence now. He says that we want to be paid in academic capital. Are you kidding me? This is not going to get me into grad school. I don't get paid for showing up and getting a ballot in the octaves of this tournament. But if we link to this argument, then you do, and hypocrisy is what you do too, and hypocrisy is worse because you're also demanding the ballot and disavowing your desire for that form of academic capital. Now, the 1AC has already asked the Montero question that he reframes in the 2NR from the perspective that black is not the problem, which means that there is no link argument other than trying to generate an artificial argument by putting words in our mouths. Please read 50% of my evidence and then tell me about what my affirmative says in the perspective that it took on the topic in the 1AC after asking 0 cross-ex questions about it. This is not a winning strategy. You're frankly not interested in what we said in the 1AC, and that's fine, but that does not give you license to tell everyone else in the room what we said more than we can. Now, the 1AC says that society both does and does not exist. The thought this was going to be a good framing point, but try engaging our evidence. The piece of Attias evidence at the end of the 1AC says that society has political utility as an ideograph, but does not exist in actuality as a sutured space, as in society is not something materially presentable that you can say this room is now society, but it is something that is constructed rhetorically through language, which is why the 1AC's political intervention